Hi, everyone. It is so nice to be here. I can't tell you. I got power with the clicker. Listen, I'm new to the clicker world, so don't judge me, okay? It is an honor. I have to say, when Jennifer reached out a long time ago, because that's how she rolls, she's organized with everything, I was so honored and had heard of this, but hadn't done much research and did quickly. And I have to say, thank you, Jennifer, for what you do. You didn't have to, but we need you. And I'm just so grateful for the effort that you put in 365 days a year to get to today and many other things. So thank you again to Jennifer. This is actually a homecoming for me a little bit. 35 years in the making. Long story short, and I'm going to tell you about my family and kind of my why in a moment, but I'm an Army brat, so when people say where you're from, I'm like, I have no idea. Pick a place. I probably lived there, different countries. But my dad, from 1984 to 89, was stationed at Fort Carson in Colorado Springs in the Army. And so he was invited, they asked him and a couple of his troops to come here to Vail for the 1989 World Alpine Ski Championships. He wasn't part of security or anything, but they said, hey, big, tall, black guy, come on in and you can make it look like we're safe here. And all of his troops, and so he got to bring my mom and us 3 kids. And again, that was in 1989. That was the last time I was here. So as I actually came from Jacksonville, Florida yesterday, my parents moved there a year ago. My dad had hip replacement surgery on Tuesday, so I was there. And he's the one that helped me with the presentation because I'm a technological idiot. And so he's the one that helped me with this whole thing. So if it goes wrong, we'll blame my dad, not me. But it was such a cool conversation to say, look at this. 35 years ago, I was a 16-year-old junior, senior in high school, and had this crazy dream of being a sportscaster, to tell the stories of greatness and like what I believe, what these people showed us that it took to be great at the most important time, at the Olympics or whatever it might be. And I had this dream, and that's why he wanted me to be here and to see it and to feel it. And so this little Army kid walks up here with the best skiers in the world. And so I promised him, don't judge me if I take a selfie out there later, because it's definitely like, look, Dad, 35 years. But they knew my love for sports and wanted me to be around it. So how cool that full circle, this shy, I was super, super shy, weird kid with this crazy dream of being on TV to talk about sports and tell you guys stories came true. And then that mouth got me in trouble, which is another reason why I'm here, right? So thank you for having me here and allowing me to tell this story, because this is where it begins, with my mom and dad. And my dad made history in 1966. He attended West Point. He became the first black man ever to play varsity football at West Point in 1966, yeah. You know, if you have time, I have had a story pinned on my Twitter X page for many years. NFL Films did a piece about that because my brother also works in the NFL, and long story short, they said, oh, your parents have a story too. So I would love it if you could take a look. It's like 8 minutes, it's on my Twitter page. But it tells the story about that too, because that wasn't his goal. He just wanted to play football, and he just happened to be the first. And that's one thing that has driven me through all these years when it's like, oh, tough times. Yeah, that's nothing. But throughout his career, 23 years in the service, retired as a colonel in 1993. And again, where am I from? I don't know. Ready? I'm going to quiz you. Born in Panama, Canal Zone. I don't know if that's a thing anymore. I've never been back since. Panama, back to West Point, where he was a football coach. Then to Fort Benjamin Harrison in Indianapolis for 7 months. Monterey, California, Fort Ord for 10 months, where he was sent to the Defense Language Institute to learn to speak Greek fluently. So we went to Greece for 2.5 years after that. And let me tell you, I remember being a little kid and walking in anywhere, and this is like 1979, 80. And you know, the Greeks would see this big, tall, 6'6.5", 225-pound, obviously American black man and his white wife and mixed kids, and they're like, and then he'd open his mouth and start speaking. The most beautiful, fluent Greek. And the free ouzo my parents got through the years, and the pinches on the cheeks that we all got, because my dad was told to, but took the time to learn the language of that country. And that's something I've learned throughout my entire life, is when you take a moment to appreciate the culture in which you're living or visiting, that goes such a long way. So that was a wonderful opportunity as a kid. I will tell you, I went on class field trips to the Acropolis. Lived in Belgium after that for 3 years. I would go to Paris with my Girl Scout troop. Every family member or friend that came to visit from the States, I always wanted to go to Paris. And I was like, do we have to go to Paris again? And now I'm like, I haven't been to Paris in 40 years. But my kids, fast forward to years later, and I'm about to move from Connecticut to go to the free state of Florida, thank you. But my kid, I'm coming. My kids, you know, are outside of Hartford, Connecticut, Bristol, Avon, Connecticut. Like their big field trip every year was the Trash and Recycling Museum in Bristol, Connecticut. So I'm like, you have fun learning how to recycle in Connecticut. I got to go to the Acropolis. So there are many benefits to being homeless as a kid where you don't really have a home. After that, so Belgium for 3 years, and then to Colorado Springs, Fort Carson for 5 years before the military said, my dad said, please don't move us. She's going into her senior year. They said, no, we'll never do that. Of course I did it. So senior year of high school, we go from Colorado to Indianapolis again, and I ended up graduating from high school there. My dad, as a military man, was he strict? Yes, but it was fair, and it was fun. For example, every Saturday morning, room inspections for me and my younger brothers, just like at West Point. So 9 o'clock in the morning, and it was 0900 hours, you couldn't say 9 o'clock. 2 knocks on the door, and we'd open the door, salute. He says, are you prepared for inspection? I mean, of course, the salute, that's probably not very good. Are you prepared for inspection? Yes, sir, no. Pop it down, he walks in, and he walks around like this. Checks the bed corners, are they properly tucked? Opens the drawers, your underwear better not be shoved in there. Dust on the dresser. Every infraction was 10 push-ups. So let me tell you about my arms at a very young age. I was jacked from a young age. My arms looked great from all those push-ups. It's a good thing he's not here. If he's on my hotel room here in Beaver Creek, he'd be like, this is 50 infractions. I'm dead. But he did that also as a competition for me and my brothers, but to respect what we had. You know, we didn't have much. I thought we had it all. But what they bought us, what they gave us, respect it, keep it clean, make your bed, pick up your clothes, don't be a brat, basically. So I look back on that, wasn't as good at that as my dad was with my kids. I'm still working on it. But those are so many amazing memories that I have from his 23 years in the service. This is something he made us do, though, as kids, made us memorize. This is part of the cadet prayer at West Point, and he probably had to say it 100,000 times during his time at West Point. But it's made a huge difference in my life. Make us to choose the harder right instead of the easier wrong, and never to be content with a half-truth when the whole can be won. When you're young, you don't really get that. But the harder right, easier wrong part did start to resonate at a young age, and then throughout my life, as I found out. But it can be little things. It can be this. Tell me there's no one in this room that's one of these cart people. I will call you out if I see you doing that at the grocery store or at Walmart. Like, take the time to put the cart back. I remember when my third kid was born, my first was still 3, okay? I understand, I'm on TV, I'm doing all these things, I'm running around, I'm busy, and I need to get in the car and it's raining, so I would love to jack the cart up on the curb right there. What, because the poor kid who has to come get it is less important than me? Put the cart back. I have had fights in parking lots over this. Not like fights, but I will come in with some sarcasm. I'll be like, hi, would you like me to take that for you? So I'm sorry if I come off sassy at times, but just put it back. It's the harder right. Or do you take the extra time? Those people who spend 30 seconds trying to balance it on the line so it doesn't roll, stop. So anyway, you can implement the harder right in everything in life. For my parents, they did it at a time that I can't even imagine. I told you about the NFL Films piece that I'd love for you to go see at some point when you're bored. But my parents had the ultimate test at a very, very young age when they had to choose the harder right. And I have a little video clip I'd like you to watch.
We ended up getting married at West Point. We were young and very naive. My parents pretty much disowned me and didn't come to the wedding or anything like that.
Mom and Dad won't talk to her because she married a black man. They were in Panama, and she called her mom to say, I'm gonna have a baby, and her mom hung up the phone.
Because of my parents and all, I didn't count on other people. It was just, I knew I could count on Gary.
There were many things that were said about what a relationship with a black husband would be and how you would end up being treated, etc. And so how are her parents going to know she's okay? So I believe it was once a month.
Once a month.
And once a month, I would pen a letter. Here's where we are, here's what's going on, here's what we're doing together. Never received a return letter.
They were always really nice letters. I mean, I questioned them every month. I'd say, I don't know why you're doing that. I do not know why you're doing this because they'll never write you or anything. And he'd say, they need to know you're okay. All right.
It was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
It was to prove a point. You know, I am taking good care of this young woman. I am doing the right thing. When we finally did get together and I had the opportunity to meet her father, he says, Gary, in his voice, you know, he says, Gary, I'd like to just forget this and move forward from here. And I guess there was a little bit of a burr under my saddle there. And I said to him, I said, Duke, I said, I can never forget the last 6 years because I had to live this. But this is day one of our relationship, and we go forward from here.
I've probably seen that 812 times. And look, every time, because of what they went through. Anyway, sorry. I need a drink. Who was wine? I'm kidding. I won't do that later. When you look at this picture, though, I mean, this is before, obviously, my dad decided to write, because this is the wedding. But look at, this is in 1971. Look at the beautiful diversity in this photo. It didn't matter what color anyone was. It was love. That's what it was, period. That's why I don't put up with any of this stuff today, because look at what they did out of love. When you talk about the hard to write, I start with my mom there. Because can you imagine being 22 years old and told to choose between your family and the man that you love? She's 22, and she did it, and she's the oldest of 4 siblings. The older of her first brother, who was 2 years younger, I guess he was 20, he said, you guys are full of it, and I'm gonna be there for her wedding. And he came. My Uncle Billy walked my mom down the aisle. I always want, and she just says, oh, don't worry, whatever. But she made that choice. That is the harder right, because that was racism, and she felt it. And it's hypocritical of everything everybody preaches, even back then. So I give her a ton of credit. And then I didn't even know that story about writing the letters until NFL Films came out with this piece. So this piece is such a blessing to our family, and long after I'm gone, my great-grandkids will know that they are here because these two made that decision. So anyway, that puts things in perspective every time I have a question or an issue, the harder right, for sure. Okay, enough. Fast forward many, many, many years, I went to Indiana University. Any Hoosiers here? Cool, kind of. Do you know where Indiana is? Okay, we'll work on that. And that was after the senior year in Indiana, a tough year. That's for the book, which I'm finally starting to write. It's a disaster, pray for me. But senior year, moving into a high school, Carmel, Indiana. You know, I graduated in 1990, so 35 years ago. I didn't have any idea of the 1,900 students in my senior class. I was the only kid, only student of color, only black student. I didn't know it, I didn't look at that. That's not what the military is. It's the most diverse, beautiful, accepting place, but they let me know. That'll be detailed in the book. And so that was the beginning, again, of me learning, okay, what's the harder right here? What do you do? Do you lash out because of what they said when they backed you into a corner and told you as a monkey to go back to Africa as a 16-year-old kid? Do you fight? Like, what do you do? Now I would cut them. Now I know what to do, but at the time, kidding, at the time, you don't know what to do and you run. Anyway, got into Indiana University, and what happened in high school was that I was a really good student every day, but for tests, I was a disaster. You know the Iowa test of basic skills, and you fill in this stupid bubble, the Scantron sheets, not good. Everything else was good, so I could balance out my GPA because I showed up and I participated in class and I did my homework and my papers, but the tests were bad. At a big university where you have 35,000 undergraduate students, you have some lectures that are 500 kids, and you're just a number. And it isn't homework assignments, it's your tests, right? So I got a call in December of 1992, from the Dean of Students at Indiana University. I was home for Christmas break, and he said, when you come back to campus, you need to come see me right away. I knew. I got in his office, I sat down, and he looked at me and he said, you have had not one, not two, but 3 straight semesters with the GPA below a 2.0. You now have until the end of this new semester, January to May, to raise it to a 3.0, or you will be escorted off this campus, kicked out, and not welcome back on any of Indiana University's 8 campuses throughout the state ever again. You have 5 months. And then he looked at me and he said, you are an embarrassment to this university. I believed him. Like, I was embarrassed because I'm like, am I stupid? Like, what is wrong with me? But I knew I was there, I was showing up, but with just tests being the basis of your grade, it didn't work for me. So I got help. Was that the best way as a leader to encourage a young, scared kid? I've never been in trouble, nothing. No. But I guess at that moment, that's what I needed, because it did embarrass me that he considered me an embarrassment, and embarrassed me for my family, and embarrassed me for me, that I knew I was better, but I was afraid to ask for help. So the harder right, I guess, and again, this is hindsight. I'm not thinking I'm going to do the harder right. Hindsight, I look back, and I was humiliated and humbled enough to go get that help. So a terrible moment that then came full circle 20 years to the day later when I was asked to give the commencement speech at Indiana University. And I told the story. I know, it's crazy. But I told the story not realizing that one of the men, the trustees sitting behind me, was the same man who called me an embarrassment to the university. But I didn't know. It wasn't like, I'm going to get him. It was to tell these students, you're going to crash and burn, and it's going to hurt and be embarrassing. What are you going to do about it? Wallow in self-pity? Like, he was a jerk about it, but I hadn't gotten it. That's on me, right? He came up to me afterwards with his wife, and he said, that was me, and I just want to apologize. And it was just, so give him credit, right? But at the end of the day, leaders to our kids mean everything, to empower, not to crush and to hurt, because if I didn't have those parents, I wouldn't have gotten back up off the floor after that total embarrassment. So I'm grateful to have been called out with that. Got my first job at the CBS affiliate in South Bend, Indiana, the non-Notre Dame station, so we had to beg to interview Lou Holtz and some of those players, but I worked my way in there, and I was there for 15 months, and then back to Indianapolis where I had interned, where it's very unfortunate that the internet lives forever. Because if I look at not just my eyebrows or my hair, why did they hire me? I don't understand why they didn't fire me when I got that haircut. Anyway, it was awesome there. Look at my dad did a good job with most of the logos of IU, Purdue, the Pacers, the Colts, Indy 500, Brickyard 400. I got to cover all of it there, and it was such a dream job. And I was making probably like 20 grand a year in a top 25 market. I mean, it was, and this is mid-90s, but still, that's nothing, right? And so I was on TV during the day, and at night I was waiting tables at a Colorado steakhouse, which is like an Outback steakhouse. And I would get recognized, and they'd be like, aren't you? I'm like, yes, how would you like your steak? Yes. Do you want butter, sour cream, bacon, and chives on your baked potato? I was really good, and I loved that, but point being, I wasn't sleeping, and it was showing on my work, so I went to my boss, and I asked him for an advance by about 6 weeks to the raise that I was contracted to get, which is about $1,500 for the next year. And I said, sir, I'll work extra. I'll work 8 days a week. I'll do whatever you need. I just don't want to ask my parents for help. Like, I don't shop. Look at my clothes. Like, I don't do any, I just need some help. And he said, we'll get back to you. A week later, he called me in his office, and he said, listen, we've talked about it. Here's the thing. You talk too fast, still an issue. Your hair's a mess, still an issue. I dress a little better, I guess. But overall, you're not worth it. You're just not worth that to us right now. And took me right back to Indiana University. I'm like, worth it? Like, you can say, this is not a good time. You can lie. But to tell, again, I'm a 23, 24-year-old kid doing every shift you want, like the graveyard, all of it. Good stories in the book for my time in Indianapolis. But to say you're not worth it broke me. So I get home, I call my mom and dad. On the phone, I'm crying. My mom goes, "What's his address?" I'm like, "Mom, we're not going to go attack the news director. We're not going to do that." My mother is half Irish, half Italian. My grandmother's name was Philomena Lena di Portola, okay? And my grandfather was William Edward O'Neill, so when I say fiery Irish Italian, watch out for Mona Steele. So she's like, "I'm going to beat him up." My dad says, "Okay, ladies, let's talk. Sanity, please." And he just asked me, "Okay, now what? Are you going to allow this man to define you, to not be worth it, and to take away this dream of yours to be a sportscaster?" I was doing it, but I wanted my dream since I was 11 years old was to do it on ESPN, SportsCenter. Are you going to allow him to take that away from you and take your confidence, or are you going to say, "Okay, fine, I'll find someone who does deem me worthy"? So I went and I found an agent. I don't know why, I know now why she took me, because I was her first ever client. And she got me a much better paying job in Tampa, Florida, where I went and also worked at Fox Sports Net Florida as well. So I went from Market 25 to Market 14, and I got to cover the Buccaneers and the Lightning and the Gators and the Knowles. My dad left off a lot of logos there. It was the Tampa Bay Devil Rays back then. That's not PC anymore. Now it's just the Tampa Bay Rays. And so I got to do all those things, and I looked, and these people believed in me. So I finally found people who believed in me, and it was a wonderful thing. That was my first taste of Florida, and that's why I'm going back now in exactly 2.5 weeks. But I look back on that time, and again, what if that, and he was like the god of news directors in that market. He had hired Jane Pauley. Like, all of us were like, oh my gosh, and I just so wanted his approval. He hired me, but then said later I wasn't worth it. And then in order to break the contract to take this job in Tampa, he said no at first, and I had to beg, and he said, "Fine, if you repay your $984 of moving expenses that we paid a year and a half ago to get you from South Bend, then you can go." Mona Steele, she's like, "Give it to him in nickels." I'm like, "We're not gonna do nickels or pennies again." You feel a theme with my mother, right? So anyway, Tampa was awesome, and then in 2001 got the call to go up to the nation's capital, Comcast Sportsnet, starting up the Mid-Atlantic network of Comcast Sportsnet. Now they're throughout the country, a great regional network. This was the second one. Philly was the first. It was awesome to be deemed worthy and experienced and talented enough to help launch a network. And again, you see the logos here. At the time, I had a choice, Redskins or Ravens, and good thing. Do we have any Redskins Commanders fans in here? Yeah, no, you just admitted that. I admire you. It's been a long road for you. But I chose the Ravens because of that, and got to do so many amazing things in the nation's capital. I'd gotten married in Tampa to my college sweetheart, my first boyfriend. And then in 2002, Quinn was born. So she's my first. She's now 22. She's a senior at High Point University. I have a junior at High Point University as well. And then the baby girl, just on Monday, I dropped her off at Ole Miss. So I'm officially an empty nester. And she is doing sorority rush today. If the phone rings, throw it. I don't want to know what she has to say to me. But this is where my real life began in my mind. And I was able to do the job that I loved and had a primary role and was able to have a family and begin a family, and that was everything to me. And in 2004, I got a call from ESPN. Again, 11 years old when I said I wanted to host SportsCenter and do all of the things as a sportscaster, and I got the call in 2004, and I was super pregnant with Nicholas, like 12 months pregnant, and I went up for the audition, and I crushed it because I had, more important things. I had a big baby bouncing on my bladder, and I'm like, can we wrap this up and go? They try to get you, they roll the wrong tape in your audition to see how you handle adversity. I'm like, whatever, I don't care what you're doing, let's go. Maybe that attitude is what helped me not be nervous. And so I passed with flying colors, and they offered me the job. And it was so amazing to get the call from the worldwide leader in sports. I was worthy, I was there. And then I thought about it, and I was like, oh my goodness, I'm about to have a baby. I want more. One of my best friends, who we lost 9 years ago, Stuart Scott, booyah for all you sports fans. He died of cancer 9 years ago, but he had my back from the beginning. He's like, listen, this is in 2004, different time. ESPN is not usually the best place for women. It's tough. And you probably should be done having children once you come here because it's tough. And so I took that advice. And I said, I can't do it. I prayed, and I just said, I can't do it. And even my husband, my parents, my agent, they said, are you insane? ESPN does not need you. You need ESPN. And if you say no to them, you will never get a call back again. You will be blackballed because they don't need you. And I just took a chance because all those years in different countries and all over the world, when it's just us, my parents sacrificed for us. They turned down jobs, not getting rich in the military, that's for sure, right? But they did that to make sure we stayed together at all times. So if I'm going to preach that to myself and to my husband and our little family, but then not practice it just because my dream job comes open, so I took a chance and said no and signed a new contract there in Washington, D.C. for 3 more years. And life continued, and I had that little boy, and I had another one. So Quinn, Nicholas, and Evan are the kids. And I just thought, if it doesn't happen, then it was worth it, because I have these guys. What's the old cliche? On your deathbed, you never say, okay, yeah, I think it's true. But I still wondered, will they have me back? And in 2007, they called back, and it was a better offer this time, too. It's interesting what happens when you believe in yourself and your abilities, even if you're scared, even if your loved ones are saying, you're crazy. So it worked out, and you guys, it was the best. I mean, I have so many thousands of pictures through the years. SportsCenter, of course, was everything to me, to be able to cover the Masters and the PGA Championship, and to give that commencement speech, which wouldn't have happened if I hadn't been on that national level, to go to the NBA All-Star Game, to go to the NBA Finals, to interview President Biden 2 months after he took office. Even though my questions were completely scripted and I was not allowed to follow up. Again, story for another day. That was fun. And another sidebar, what I felt in the commercial break before we began recording that interview was devastating to me as a young woman, not young, but a woman who I lost my grandmother to Alzheimer's. I saw that in that interview in 2021 and talked about it and tried. No one would listen. So to me, I don't care how we feel politically, what has happened with him is heartbreaking because those who love him have allowed it. And if I saw it in a 3-minute commercial break before the interview started, you know damn well that his wife and his children and his staff and everyone else saw it. So on a human level, I am so sad at what we have come to in this country because the people around us don't stand up for us when we need it the most. But it was an opportunity. I got to interview a sitting president. So many wonderful things. Life changed for me at ESPN. I saw a big change in 2016 when Donald Trump was elected. I was doing the NBA show in LA at that time, lived in Arizona, flew into LA for a couple days each week. And we were told to never speak about politics. That was a directive. And then I saw on Twitter that night of the election, my bosses, the leadership of this company on Twitter, going crazy about Donald Trump being elected and how ugly it was. And I thought, if this is what our leaders are saying, what does this mean for us? And then others started to speak up, and there was a lot of controversy about that. 2021 is when I went on a podcast with Jay Cutler, former Bears quarterback, I guess Broncos quarterback too. And I knew his publicist, and he had just started his podcast, and the publicist said, hey, he needs a woman. Would you mind? I'm like, sure. The timing was interesting because I had just come that day from getting the COVID vaccine that I was forced to get in order to keep my job. I had to be fully vaccinated by September 30th, 2021, or I was out. I was going to be fired. And I was livid, and I was devastated. And I fought and fought and fought. And this was on September 13th. In order to be fully vaccinated by that day, that was the last time I could get the shot. And leading up to it, was just angry and say, why this is wrong. Like, it just took me a very simple Google search to look at the average time it takes for the FDA to approve a vaccine or most drugs, 6 to 9 years. And I thought, I'm just not comfortable. I'm not anti-vax. I just don't, for me and my kids, like, don't force this. Please give me time, give me time. I've been an employee here for so many, and the answer was no. So I had to make a decision between, supporting my family. I got divorced a few years ago. I have these 3 kids, all in college at the same time right now. Every ounce of the finances for all of us are on my shoulders, 100%. So when people say you have choices, you made a choice, I did. But I felt like I did not have a choice if I'm going to keep a roof over the heads of my children. And so I just prayed that day when I walked in there that it would go through me and it would just be fine. And I will never forget sitting in the parking lot at the Stop and Shop grocery store pharmacy. I found an appointment to get the 1 shot and praying, and then walking in with tears in my eyes, and the nurse, the wonderful lady at the pharmacy, said, are you okay? And I looked at her and I said, no, I'm not. I'm being forced to do this to keep my job. And this woman looked at me, grabbed my hand, and said, this is so wrong, and I'm so sorry. And when she put that needle in my arm, I don't know, something changed in me. Just because I was forced to do something that I wasn't comfortable with by people who preach about bodily autonomy and being able to make your own choices for your own body as a woman, right? So the hypocrisy was thick, but I felt I had no choice. And I still struggle and haven't fully forgiven myself for caving. But I did what I had to do at that moment for my kids. And then I sprinted home because I had this previously planned podcast with Jay Cutler. And it was summer, it was September, it was still warm in Connecticut, and I had a short sleeve shirt on and a Band-Aid on my shoulder. And I didn't even think about it because I ran in and I was sweating and I flipped up the laptop, FaceTime, here we go. And he asked me 3 questions. 3 things got me in trouble. The first one, and again, it's we don't have enough time. I was asked about women in sports and how they have evolved and how I believe we as women should carry ourselves, especially in professional settings, in locker room situations, which is very unique to my industry. And when you're in a locker room with 75, 80, depending on time of year, 90 to 100 NFL players, and you're in their space. They're getting dressed. We're working while they're getting dressed. And to me, we as women have a responsibility. We know, I say this to my daughters, okay? I'm like, why are you wearing that? Where are you going? What's your point? Like, what's your goal? Because we as women, we are smart. We know exactly what we're wearing, when, where, why. So stop. So I have had interns who I've said, you're not coming in the locker room with me because it's taken me all these years to build up credibility. And when you come with your cheeks hanging out and all this showing, sorry, not professional, and that reflects on me. Go change. So I've been very consistent with this, but in this time in America, it wasn't received as well. The second topic was race and how passionate I am about being biracial and saying, yes, I am both. I'm so grateful to my parents who took that risk and took that leap all those years ago out of love. And when I'm told by many people, white and black, certainly more in the black community, that no, one drop, and you're black. I'm like, no, I'm both. Like, I am the definition of diversity. I'm so proud to be both. Like, isn't that what America is? And oh, by the way, I'm pretty sure my white mom was there the day I was born. I'm not ignoring my mother because of political correctness crap in this country right now. That got me, thank you. Years prior, I'd been on The View in 2014, and Barbara Walters brought it up to me, and she was angry that I said biracial. She said, well, Barack Obama, our president. I said, well, good for him. Like, congratulations for him. I think it's fascinating that he chooses to ignore his white mother and white grandmother who raised him. He wrote a book about it. This is not breaking news. But when his black father was not there for him, you do you, I'm gonna do me, and I'm proud of all of me. And that was an issue. The third thing was the vaccine. And again, he's like, what's on your shoulder? And I'm like, well, here we go. Good job, Sage. Should have taken that off. And I just said, listen, I think it's sick, and I think it's scary that any corporation can force someone to do something to their body. And it's Disney, and it's a global company, but I think it's sick. And that's all it took. So when the podcast dropped, a couple of weeks later, my phone rang, and all the executives came, and it was ugly. And I was suspended and pulled off the air. They don't like to say suspended. It was a paid suspension, but I was suspended. And I was taken off the air, and all of my assignments were taken away. I was taken off of, hosted the New York City Marathon. I hosted the Rose Parade in Pasadena. All of these things I'd built up so many years to try to do, and those were gone. They stopped promoting any stories I did. And finally, I stood up, and I'm like, what is this? And I got a call from a very dear friend, Chris Harrison. He used to host The Bachelor on ABC, and he's a dear friend of mine, and he was canceled and deemed a racist, and he was told to go away by ABC, which of course, Disney owns ESPN and ABC, and he said, you need to call my attorney, and I did. The same attorney, Brian Friedman, by the way, who currently represents Tucker Carlson, who represented Megyn Kelly, who represents Don Lemon right now, who represents Chris Cuomo, me. So anytime one of us in the media goes through something, we know who to call, and he is a dear friend who doesn't need a penny. He is set for multiple lives, but he cared about me and my story and the wrong that was done. not just about me, but for the future. Let's stop these corporations from doing these things. And so I called Brian, and what we found, speaking of freedom of speech, what we found, First Amendment. I'm allowed to say what I want to say if you're allowing my peers to go on ESPN airwaves and to cry during an NBA show when Roe versus Wade was overturned and talk about how there's going to be women dying on a basketball show. When you allow our women's basketball coverage to be interrupted for a moment of silence because of the alleged Don't Say Gay bill in Florida. So we're okay talking about it when it fits a certain narrative. But if someone on an off day, on an off podcast, separate from ESPN, speaks about my values as a woman in sports, when there were no other women in locker rooms, as a proud biracial woman, and as a woman who was forced to take a vaccine, but I complied, then I'm out? No. So that's when we've decided to file a lawsuit, which devastated me. When you file a lawsuit, you know you're not going to get a contract renewal after that, right? So I knew it was the end of this huge, huge dream, and I knew that I had to stand up. But I should have clicked to this earlier, but this is what happened, and they forced me to apologize publicly as well. And they intentionally made me feel smaller and to silence me, because I had been silenced before. I listened before, and this one time I didn't. And so this broke me, you guys, and I just knew that I had to change. We found that in the state of Connecticut, because First Amendment is Constitution government, right? It doesn't apply to private employers. In the state of Connecticut, of all states, there is a statute that says you are allowed to criticize your employer if you're following policy, if you're following all of the rules and complying. And I complied with everything. I took that shot. I did everything. So we had a case. And that's why I decided to file it, even though it was devastating and embarrassing and all of the things. 3 weeks after I filed the lawsuit, I was covering the PGA Championship in Southern Hills and just gotten off the air and was standing there just watching the top group, all the golf fans, John Rahm, Colin Morikawa, Scotty Scheffler, the world top 3, and I'm literally standing there looking towards the hole. We are way, way, way left fairway, like way out, and Rahm just 280 yards away. They say approximately 150 miles an hour, no bounce, direct shot, hit me in the mouth. Ricocheted so hard off my teeth that it went back into the middle of the fairway, so loud that they thought it hit the tree next to me. That was my mouth. By the grace of God, I was alive. I was standing. I never lost consciousness. I never even fell to the ground. I ended up kneeling. If you see my hand here, the blood, I had just been told, so the doctors, the EMTs ran right over to see what was there or not there. And then when they knew I was okay, my co-host was with me, and he was hiding me behind the tree, standing just to the left, because the TV cameras were coming, and he didn't want me to be seen with blood on my face and missing teeth, frankly. So I had to wait down there for about 4 or 5 minutes. I don't know who took this picture. I'm very grateful for it, because I'll never forget what was going through my mind at that moment. Yes, thank God I'm alive. But 3 weeks after filing this lawsuit, I had been crushed by the media, by Twitter, by social media, of course, and I heard the most awful things going through my mind. This is what you get. This is what you deserve. This is why you stay quiet. This is what you get. And I literally thought, I'll just drop the lawsuit, God. Are you trying to tell me something? It wasn't God. It was that other guy. And at the time, though, I was obviously in shock. But I'll never forget hearing these evil thoughts to tell me to stop speaking up. Eventually, they played through and wheeled me away. I went to the hospital, and the next day they put me on a plane, and it's the only time I was okay wearing a mask because I had no teeth. I'm like, oh, give me one of those this time. I won't complain this time. And I got back and and if you ever get hit in the mouth with a golf ball, I have a great dentist in Canton, Connecticut. So it ends up, it was 8 teeth, 3 root canals, lip surgery, all the things. But if you think about it, that's it. If I had been looking down at my cell phone at that exact instant for a split second, that doesn't hit me here, it hits me here, eye, temple. At minimum, a fractured face, right? If not dead. What a blessing. So while the evil thoughts are going through my head, I'm like, I must be here for a reason. God's keeping me here for a reason. So now, once I got that out of my head, I have to continue, even if it involved humor, because I said to my dentist, it's okay. Like, is this what we want to do? Like, I don't know, ratings might go higher on ESPN. They might like me better. They might not I don't know, punish me. So he's like, you're cute. We're not doing that. That would make me, I said, no, just look bad. So that went away. Anyway, I went back to work 20 days later like an idiot because I felt this pressure to say, see, I'm not taking it for granted, and I'm tough, and I'm strong, and I can stand up for myself and get hit in the face and almost die. And I had fake teeth in for 4 months, so I'm doing a 2-hour live national show and doing highlights and all the things, and I'm spitting everywhere because I don't understand these teeth. And like, what do you do? And I, at the same time, had the lawsuit, and they're like, everyone hates you. Why are you here? Bosses were telling me this. But all I know is that every single day, I loved my job. Remember that little girl? I loved that job, and I knew I could not let them silence me. Every single day, from the moment I was let back from the suspension until the day I left ESPN, was 22 months. And I would pull into the parking lot and finish my mascara and call my mom and dad. And on speakerphone, we would recite the prayer. It's St. Michael the Archangel, for anyone who's Catholic and knows about St. Michael. And it was, the gist of it is, protect me from the wickedness and snares of the devil. So basically, when I went into work every single day, I felt protected. I felt like I had this bubble around me from what you literally felt, the ugliness from people that were my friends and chose to not be after I was true to myself. The hypocrisy is thick. But it broke me for a long time until I paid attention to the positivity in that bubble and just prayed that every day I wouldn't let any of that God wouldn't let any of that in, but that I would only exude who I am, which has always been this hyper, silly, nice, friendly person, and to not let them jade me. And I feel like I did my best work of my career during those 22 months when I was the most scared and the most hurt. And I look back at that, and I'm proud of that, but it's only because of the grace of God that gave me the strength to walk in every single day. But how cool that mom and dad and me in the parking lot every single day saying that prayer. So I really wouldn't change a thing. And eventually last August 14th, last year, we settled. And, you know, I knew it was coming. It was still like, oh, it's over, like my whole life. And then I made it. And then 16 and a half years. And just like that, it's over. So, you know what? Honestly, I wouldn't change a thing. The number of people who have come up to me to say, even people when I was still there, who would whisper, young women would follow me in the bathroom and say, thank you, you're speaking for me. So what they want you to do is to feel completely alone and like you're the only one. And for so many years it worked, and I did. And it's such a beautiful thing to push through all that and the fear. One of the things I've gained the most is to finally be okay being disliked. It still sucks, right? It still hurts. We're human. We all have that need to be liked to an extent, but it's less now. And because I know in my heart that I'm doing not just what's right for me, but also for my children and anyone else who's watched me throughout my career and hopefully still will. I'll tell you this, the night before my lawsuit dropped on April 28th, I spoke to each one of my kids separately. My daughter Quinn was a freshman in college, my son Nicholas was a senior in high school, and my daughter Evan was a sophomore in high school. And everyone had a different reaction, but my Nicholas is in between these two psycho daughters of mine. And he is very observant, and he just feels a lot. And so I said, buddy, to all of them, I'm sorry for what's gonna happen. I need you to know what's happening and why. And don't ever feel the need to defend me, okay? If teachers, coaches, parents, friends ask, because all those adults had talked to my children, hey, your mom. I'm like, stay in your lane, teach math. If you have an issue with something their mother said, come to their mother. Like Mama Bear, this is when I go, ugh. And so I said, just tell them everyone has a right to their own opinion. Diversity of thought is everything. I don't want you to defend me, but just know that that is what this is all about throughout America. All these people who preach it but don't practice it. So you say that, and if you have an issue, you call me. I got you. But I didn't want them to feel like they had to take the brunt of this because I chose to stand up. My kids have been attacked on social media. People threatened to rape my daughters, wish death upon my kids because of me. So I needed them to know, they're old enough to understand. And as I said, I'm sorry to my son, but be ready. He put down whatever he was doing, and he looked at me and he goes, Mom, it's about time you stood up for yourself. And I sobbed because I thought all these years, I'm staying quiet to protect them because I didn't want them to have to deal with it. And the whole time, what was happening? They saw me choosing to be quiet, choosing to make myself smaller, to appease my bosses, to keep my job, to get another raise. It worked. But to what end? 2 days after I left ESPN, I was on Megyn Kelly's show. I love her, love that woman. And she is such a beautiful, strong soul. And I just, for 2 hours, she just asked me questions and I just let it all out. I had no idea how much was in there. And she asked me what my line was, and I said, I didn't know my line until that line was crossed. And then you have a decision to make. So to get that validation from my 17-year-old son at that moment, I knew that no matter what happened with Disney, I already won, because my kids saw that I stopped being afraid to stand up for myself and to stand up for them and to stand up for our family, because there was a lot of pressure on me to pay all those bills, right? So that was the victory. And since then, I've been able to spend such incredible time with them, with my mom and dad. The picture top middle was in Greece a year ago, right before I left ESPN, actually. And I had the opportunity to take my mom and dad back to Greece, where we hadn't been since we left in 1981. 42 years later, we went back to the little apartment in Glafada, Greece, where it all kind of began. And what a blessing to have been able to do that with them. My dad had surgery. He has 2 kinds of cancer, prostate cancer, multiple myeloma. They moved to Jacksonville a year ago because of the Mayo Clinic. These are the moments you don't get back. This is why I'm okay figuring it out all over again and starting over with the Sage Steele Show. YouTube, subscribe, and like, please. And this is the why, because it is bigger. It goes back to when I turned down ESPN, but it goes further back, doesn't it? It goes back to choosing that harder right, even when you're scared, even when you don't know what the outcome is, and to truly, truly never, ever be content, like this says, with a half-truth when the whole truth can be won. There are too many of us right now who are afraid, and I get it. I lived it. I went from making a lot of money to 0. But I have this faith that it's gonna work out, and it is. Not in a financial way yet, but it'll come. Because I believe if you're doing things for the right reason, yes, but also because it's not just about you. When you're choosing to empower others by pushing through your own fear. I go back to that little shy 16-year-old who was here 35 years ago. So shy, afraid of her own shadow, but had this crazy dream that along the way everybody's like, maybe not, you're not worth it, whatever it might be. We do have to take accountability for that, and we can allow them to get in and hurt us and deter our dreams, but that's not their fault. Shame on them, but that's on us if we choose to let that fear lead us. You don't have to get on social media and be a big mouth like me. You don't have to do it that way. There are other ways. There are small ways to do it. And I feel a turn right now where we are in this country, but it does take courage, sadly. But own it, rock it. If not, what happens, you know? Every single day, think about it, whatever choice you have, whether it's standing up for yourself with your employer, whether it's having a tough conversation, making a tough personal decision in your marriage, whether it's putting the grocery cart back. The harder right, not the easier wrong. Thank you. Cry every time. Thank you. Why do I cry when I do this? And we look amazing, don't we?
We didn't even plan this.
We did
Power
not,
Pink
no.
on the stage today. I just wanted to put my kids on notice. 0900 next Saturday morning, Manning kids. Room inspections are on the way.
Push-ups.
Push-ups, they're going to do.
Your husband approves, yes.
Jack's going to be great in Little League after all the push-ups. Yeah, there's going to be countless push-ups. Their rooms are chaos. Okay, let's get to it. As I was listening to you talk, I was thinking so much about this question of identity in our world. We talk a lot about identity politics. Obviously, the gender identity issue is really big, but you are someone who seems to have had, from a very early age, security in your identity and knowing who you are and having bedrock principles to live by. No?
No.
Tell us more about that.
That shy kid, man, no. I mean, how many of us feel confident and secure as teenagers or as young adults? And now in this age of social media, when I watch my daughters and son and how it tells you to be or act or think or feel, no. That's more recent, I'd say. And by identity, what do you mean, though?
Who you are, just knowing what
what I want.
What you want, what drives you, what your principles are, what you stand for. I mean, at least today, it seems like those questions are pretty clear for
and
you.
I'm almost 52.
But
it
seems like your parents also
Yeah.
initially and throughout your life have directed you in a good
They
direction,
have.
right?
And I think in hindsight, yes, maybe it was in there, but it was just a matter of owning it and not being afraid to own it and to rock it and to be like, again, to be okay being disliked for being yourself. It's funny, you're told, no, accept me. There's litter boxes at my daughter's high school for the furries, right? So we're okay accepting children who say they're a boy today, a girl tomorrow, and a cat the next day. So like, how about you accept me then for being a conservative? Because I think that's, I don't know, are we comparing things? And so once we get to that point of being okay, being disliked for that, there's such freedom. I wish it hadn't taken me so long, which is why you got to speak about it in hopes that our children don't take as long as we did, But it's, I would say in the last, truly in the last 6 to 7 years, that's it. Recent.
And how would you describe that process of becoming more comfortable with speaking out?
Brutal, scary, ugly. And agents and executives I had a boss who actually just was fired from ESPN after 30 some years. He one time called me and he's like, well, I'm seeing what you're liking on Twitter. Why are you liking those things? I'm like, this is a multi-billion-dollar company and you're watching what I like? I'm not even retweeting it, I'm hearting it. So they scare you.
Yes.
They use these fear tactics in so many instances to make you not do it. And you just have to say, again, what's your line? I didn't know till it was crossed. But I do want others to think of that. And it may change and evolve, right? But it's been scary. And again, in my personal life too, I'm Catholic. I married my first boyfriend like age 20 to 47. That's all I knew. So to accept my heart with that and why changes needed to be made, despite the fact that I talked to my priest, I'm like, am I going to go to hell? There's so many things that you have to ask yourself, right? And to be true to who you are, even if it is uncomfortable. And that's, I think, the key for me. And Nick Saban, the now former Alabama coach, came on my show once on SportsCenter at ESPN, and he said, the key to greatness, the key to success, get comfortable being uncomfortable. I'm really good at being uncomfortable right now. And I think maybe that's the key, is to just be uncomfortable and know you're going to get out of it one way or another. And no matter what, there's a reason for whichever way it goes.
One question I wanted to ask, because also a theme throughout your life story, there were times when you faced a lot of adversity, whether it was criticism from someone saying you're an embarrassment to this university or losing a job. So what would your advice be to someone who may be in a place right now where they have faced that adversity? You responded to that adversity by overcoming, right? And you described your soft place to land with your parents, but also many people who don't have that kind of support are looking for something to get them through a time of adversity. So what would your advice be?
My mother shared this with me many years ago as a kid, but also recently, 5 years ago. She's 70, she'll be 75 next month. And I was talking to her about what she's proud of in her life. I remember I was doing laundry and just we're on the phone, what she's proud of and what she regrets. And her biggest regret was that she lived in fear at times of what would or would not happen, and that she didn't just go for it and try it. And a number of different things. She wanted to run a marathon, never fully did it, right? This much younger, right? She wanted to be a police officer at one point in her career. She wanted to speak at all these things, and she just implored me from a young age, back when I was getting the mean messages from administrators or employers, and she's like, again, what is your dream? If you don't push through this moment, you're gonna regret it, at least not trying. So she made me promise her, you can't listen to that fear, just try it. What if you hadn't gone for it and on the soccer team and tried out? I remember being an 8th grader on wanting to play volleyball, and I worked literally for months. And people have expectations when you're tall and athletic, but you're gonna get, I was not good, but I worked and worked and worked, and then I got there, and on the last day before tryouts, I quit. And I'm to this day embarrassed about that 8th grader who walked out because I didn't even try. So it was a beautiful conversation when that 8th grader quit, because she made me promise I would never quit again and at least try and fall on your face and get back up. As you've seen, I've fallen on my face a lot. Even gotten all my teeth knocked out.
Got hit in the face.
But I'm still here. And so each time you build more confidence, and that's what I want people to realize. You're growing throughout all the tough times.
Let's go for it.
Yeah.
I really want to ask some audience questions, but first I'm going to need Haley or Dan to come make the iPad work because it's not loading any audience questions. So if one of you guys will come make the internet work on my iPad. In the meantime, I have one more question from me, and that is, tell us about the Sage Steele Show.
Oh.
What's it going to be about? Is it a sports show, or are you going to cover other topics? Tell us what to expect.
Thank you for asking. It launched on March 28th. I have had all kinds of different guests. My first guest was Dana White, president of UFC, who I talked to yesterday, and I told him, he's the best. I told him where I was coming. He said, tell them I said hi, and he had some other explicit language that I won't share because that's Dana. God love him. I was with him when he got the text message from Donald Trump saying, I want you to come I want you to introduce me at the RNC. And the back and forth, because he had this holiday thing scheduled with his, oh my gosh, he inspires me, and he was my first guest. I hadn't even met him officially until he flew in on his plane from Las Vegas to Los Angeles to do my show, and then flew back on his plane. It was such an honor that he did that for me. So I've had the Dana Whites of the world who are so strong. Dana White, president of UFC, yeah. My peripheral vision's really good. I heard you. It's good. And I love it. Keep asking. I love it. He's a special guy. You got to watch my show. To RFK Jr., I had RFK Jr. on, and it kind of created a little bit of a debate because I asked him about abortion because he'd been flip-flopping back and forth on this, and I asked him, and push. He didn't like it, and he eventually admitted that he was fine with abortion even up to full term. And then I was like, excuse me? But he had said it before, and then back and forth. An hour later, Nicole Shanahan, his running mate, came in, and I said that to her. She said, well, that's not true. That's not what. And I'm like, he just sat right here and said that. 2 days later, what happened? He released a statement saying, well, I have educated myself now on full term. I'm like, if you're running for president and we don't know what full-term abortion is. Anyway, interesting conversations like that. And I'm grateful because he did it. And I'm grateful for what he did yesterday with Donald Trump, too. Like, I really am grateful for. Thank you. I so respect him. And again, when you look at the statement from his family, what they said from Rory yesterday, it's disgusting. That wasn't your question. Dana White, RFK Jr., Nicole Shanahan. My studio is in Howie Mandel's studio in Van Nuys, California. Mayim Bialik, who is, we think, completely blossom, right? And Big Bang Theory, she hosted Jeopardy.
Jeopardy.
Completely different from my views, and it was beautiful. And at the end of it, she looked at me, and she said, she's like, I have to admit to you, I was nervous about coming on with you because I did my homework and I didn't know what you wanted to ask me. Oh. And then she said, but this was great and thank you. Yeah. And I almost cried because I want to talk to people who think differently. Yeah. I get 99% no's. I've tried. Yeah. Most people say no and won't come on. So again, we preach conversation, which is the point of the show, but then we don't practice it. And then when someone's different, you run the other way. And then some athletes. I just had Tyrus on. Do you guys watch Gutfeld? Tyrus. Let me tell you about this show, and it just dropped on Wednesday. He just texted me before I came on what he shared with me about the abuse he endured at the hands of his father and his stepfather and why that makes him a great father. He was crying on my set the other day. And my goal is to have conversations like that because we judge people based on what we see on TV, what we see on social media, what we see when you're saying hi to your neighbor, but you don't know what they're going through. You don't know what makes them who they are. And so to me, the goal of my show will always be conversation and to let everyone else see that I'm a lot more than that girl you saw on SportsCenter for all those years. We're all dealing with things. When we realize that, and you lead with kindness more so because you understand everybody's got something. And Dana shared it. Dana was caught up in a controversy on New Year's Day a couple years ago, and he and his wife were intoxicated, and she hit him, and he hit her back, and it was on video, and it was ugly. And he talked about it, and the lessons that his kids learned from it. We've got to have these conversations, and I'm honored to be able to have them.
That's great. I'm sure we're all going to follow and subscribe and watch the show. I'll ask one question that I've been curious about, and that's because ESPN is on a lot at my house.
I know.
And are there any other ESPN viewers in here? No? Maybe? Yes? I mean, it covers a lot of sports. ESPN's, I think, very woke. So I'm curious your perspective. You were there for many years. Was it a slow burn, or when did you notice that, oh gosh, they're really starting to go?
Yeah, it was slow burn.
Slow burn.
But I mentioned 2016 when Trump was elected and how I really saw it turn then. But you would even go in the makeup room and there was ugliness. in the makeup room from some of the artists or some of the other on-air people who felt very free to just crush people who are more middle right conservative. And it was ugly. So it's been that way. It's been very tolerated for a long time. But this isn't just ESPN. It's from the top at Disney and Bob Iger and how he chooses to lead. And it's everywhere. So it's been this way for a long time. You've seen, my very, very, very close friend Samantha Ponder was fired last week from ESPN. She has an incredible story herself, such a woman of faith. I can't wait for you to hear more from her. They said it was a financial reason. Many of us believe there was a little more. She and I both received terse letters from management a year ago when I was still there about speaking out about the trans sports issue in women's sports and how we needed to quiet down. And she did not, and I did not, and then I left, and then she didn't. And so it's a little coincidental, maybe, that she's been fired, but I think that more and more they're exposing themselves, and it breaks my heart because it is the worldwide leader in sports. There are some incredible people there. No one does better work than we did, period. And there comes a time, and I think that more and more people, Kirk Herbstreit with College Game Day, he's spoken up, and he used to text me saying, good job, and I wish I could speak up more. And I'm like, Kirk, you can. I don't want to be the only one. And oh, by the way, you make a lot more money than me. You have that freedom. And so I do believe there's a slow burn here with many of us, people who think like many of us in this room, and just, again, diversity of thought, and to crush people who don't fit that liberal, progressive narrative is not okay, and more people are taking a stand.
I have a question about Kirk Herbstreit and Sam Ponder and Pat McAfee. So I first want to ask you, because I find this a little hypocritical or ironic that ESPN is such a progressive environment, and yet you also spoke to, at least initially in your job there, how it might have been difficult to be a woman at ESPN. So much for progressive environment. But can you talk more about what it was like to maybe break through some glass ceilings or work in an environment that was male-dominated and is still today male-dominated in sportscasting?
When I got there, Linda Cohn had been there for a long time. She's still there in some capacity now, and she's a true legend. Robin Roberts was a SportsCenter anchor there long before I got there. She'd been gone a couple years when I started in 2007. So I am by far the first. Oh my gosh. But I did see it go from 07 to 23. It's a different world. For the most part, I didn't experience anything real negative. In hindsight, I think maybe one of the funny things was that I'm obviously tall, and then on TV, I don't care how tall you are because we have standing shots. We're walking and talking. You do not wear flats. The camera's just not nice. Okay. I always say I love watching sports on high definition. I don't like being on high definition television. There's a big difference. It's very unforgiving, but you got to wear heels. And I had producers who would ask me, listen, your co-host, always a man, your co-host, he's a lot shorter than you. Would you mind not wearing those shoes? I'm like, hire taller guys. That's not my fault. It took me a long time to be okay to be this height. I'm 5'11", add heels and hair, and I'm a good 6'2". But I finally stood up straight. I was self-conscious my whole life, and I didn't want to be the tallest girl in the class, person in the class. Now I'm standing tall. But so if this is reverse, so if it was a petite woman that a man's hosting with, would they ask him to? No, of course not. So stop with it. We have come such a long way, and I do want to, there's so much positivity with that and with women, certainly. I have hosted with other women. There's still a ways to go, and I think especially at the top, the leadership, the people making the decisions, we talk about DEI and all that, yes, fine, and that also means it's not just one thing to have people at the table, but are you actually listening? And fine, we're diverse this way, and gender and all those things. Are we diverse with our thoughts and our opinions? And that answer is no. And that's where I think that really needs to continue to evolve at ESPN and Disney and all the corporations to make sure that we don't go backwards with how women were made to feel.
Right, because that diversity of thought leads us to the best ideas. Speaking of diversity of thought at ESPN, a question about Kirk Herbstreit from the audience. With him speaking out against men in women's sports, do you see a changing of the tide at ESPN?
Yeah, so I think that's what I was alluding to a little bit. I do. There's so many other people like Kirk who just have been afraid to speak up. And again, I always say I'm like the poster child for why people stay silent. I get it.
someone
I get
asked,
it.
what are your thoughts on Sam Ponder's recent firing from ESPN?
Yeah, so I am livid, but not surprised.
Yeah.
I was dropping my daughter off at Ole Miss when the news broke, and so I try to stay silent, believe it or not, I do. But I put my phone up and just recorded a little something because I love her, and I wanted her to not feel alone like I did when I was going through it. Publicly. It's one thing privately, which is helpful, but publicly when someone stands up for you, it's very rare. So I wanted to do that for her, and she's, again, her maiden name is Steele, so Sam Steele, Sage Steele. We're all like, oh, we're twinsies, but she's hot blonde, 15 years younger, not exactly twins, but I'll take it. And she's just, it makes me sad because she was the last one left. We were the only ones who stood up for women in sports, and for a network that preaches women and uplifting women. And I used to host the ESPN W Summit for the first 10 years of its inception, and I was the face. They had my face on the room keys, okay? The hotel room keys. Every year, I'm fighting my producers. We got to get these WNBA highlights higher up in the rundown. They can't be at the end of the show. Fought and fought and fought. We made such progress. And then for the most obvious, blatant topic ever, this isn't an opinion about a vaccine mandate, okay? We can have opinions on that. This is science. Don't we like to hashtag follow the science? This is science. Men and women are different, especially in sports. And it's so blatant also when you see it only going one way, right? Are there women trying to go play in the NFL or NBA? No, of course not. So I think that Sam's firing is all tied into that. She's going to be good. And please keep an eye out for her. She has 3 little kids. She has taught me so much with the scripture she shares with me and our overall connection with faith. And I'm glad for her now because she's okay, right? I'm glad because what we don't realize is that there's a whole world out here of people who are accepting and kind and tolerant, and even if we think differently, want to be around others to learn. And Sam's going to find that out just as I have, and I can't wait.
All right, we're getting to the end of our time, but I wanted to offer you the opportunity. Any closing thoughts or anything left to say?
I'm so grateful for all of you. It's interesting. For years, once I started to get controversial, just for being true to myself, I found that I was, travel a lot, I'm in airports, I found that I was looking down. I was looking at the ground. I was like, this is when I need wine. I was afraid to make eye contact quite often because I was afraid that the hatred that I received on the internet was going to be in person and that someone was going to say the things that they're actually writing. So I was scared to death. And slowly but surely through the last few years, especially once I got suspended and then went back to work, I mean, who sues their company while they're still there and on their airwaves every day? Usually you wait till after, and I'm like, nope, here we go. And so I found so many people coming up to me and saying thank you, even though I don't believe I deserve a thank you. It was just, I started to look up again. I started to make eye contact. I started to be myself and smile again, even with my new teeth, right? And I just am like, it's okay if they don't like me. I'm going to make that eye contact because I now know that by finding that in me, by looking back at my parents and what they went through, that I'm not just speaking for myself or for my kids. I'm speaking for so many other people. The emails and text messages and DMs I got from across the world since the moment I got suspended, even before then, but mainly then, are people I'll never meet. I had no idea that many people watched ESPN. More so it was once you get blown up by Disney and then your international headlines, that's when they're like, who's that girl with curly hair? Oh. And so you realize that it's not about you. And when we stay quiet out of fear, we're doing a disservice to others who maybe don't have the platform. So my platform might be blown up tomorrow. I don't know. I could be canceled again for the 80th time. But today, I have it. If I don't use it, what a waste. And that's why what you're doing, Jennifer, and what everyone here is doing, just by being here, is inspiring to me and makes me continue to make that eye contact.
Ladies and gentlemen, Sage Steele.